Podcasting since 2005. This is the King of Podcasts Radio Network. KingofPodcasts.com.
From radio to a podcasting, Podtopia. Welcome back to Podcasters Row, which I'm glad all of you are happy and been coming back about having the show back on a more frequent format. As right now, it's been airing 2 times a month. Pretty good way for me to go and handle with all my other programming, which you can find over at KingofPodcasts.com. Also find the show over on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Amazon Music, iHeartRadio, all other major podcast platforms. You can find all the content there. Social media, everything's there. You want to donate to the program or to myself for all this hard work? Greatly appreciated. The tip jar is all set and ready. It's empty, ready for your donation. So with that said, I want to go ahead and introduce my guest for this episode. He has over 2 decades shaping narratives in media, PR, broadcasting, and podcasting. He's dedicated his career to helping distinctive brands and voices cut through the clutter. Journey has spanned from being a music director and program director to on-air host for the local and nationally syndicated radio programs on platforms like Westwood One. And he's also had a lot of work in crafting impactful media strategies, securing top-tier press for clients as a former podcast publicist, and cultivating loyal audiences. These are experiences he says he believes align well with the dynamic world of podcast networking. I'm here with the CEO at Podtopia Network, Joe Massa. Joe, thanks for being on with me.
Yeah, Jorge, appreciate you inviting me onto the show. Really looking forward to talking with you today and going over my experience and just listening to you read everything that I sent to you. It sounds like I've been doing this for 100 years, but you know, the industry, you just go through these phases where you kind of start one direction, where I did in radio back in the early 2000s. And it's just so much fun to watch it evolve into this podcasting world we live in now. So really looking forward to sharing my experiences with you today.
So in radio, I like to go and just say, when you have the kind of skill sets that you have, you become the Swiss Army knife. But let's just make this clear. I've already took my own experience in radio here on this program. Not as extensive as yours, not as much behind the mic as yours, or in front of the mic. Mine was more behind the mic and only for so much. But for me, you have to, and even now, especially in the radio space, for you to go ahead and be noticed or recognized, it's not like it was before, where somebody could just have one set position and just be really good at it. You really have to be multiversatile, multitasking. In media in general now, the same thing goes for anything in media, anything in just of journalism or being able to go and run as an honored talent. You got to know everything else you got to have behind the scenes because your job depends on it. I just want to ask real quickly about what you've done from the nationally syndicated realm. So working with Westwood One, and before we just got on, you were talking about some of the formats you worked on, because what you got to do was very fascinating. There's a lot of radio stations that, I mean, you really facilitate a service, because for some of these radio stations that are out there that can't provide local talent, can't provide a full schedule of people to go ahead and run the format, run a music format, let alone put out talent that can go ahead and facilitate a radio station. There's a lot of these satellite radio formats, in a way I would like to call it. And that's what you got to do with some of what you did at Westwood One. Tell me about some of that and really what the experience was for you.
Yeah, so originally, and going back to your point, you know, the old school radio format was live and local, and that was sort of the pressing part about it is every station had somebody's butt in the chair and they were in your city and they were talking on the microphone. Right. But as the technology grew, it made it a lot easier to syndicate that radio format and content. So I could be in Denver or Chicago or Miami, and I could record a show that plays in Mississippi or New Jersey or Pennsylvania, or you know, pick your flavor or pick your location. So that's what Westwood One is essentially. So it's a satellite radio provider. However, it's not like a Sirius XM radio, correct, you know, paid subscription. Essentially, we record radio shows that get distributed via satellite to local FM markets so they can hear our content in their local community. And if you're a listener, you would have no information wiser that I'm not sitting in your town on the radio. Sounds like I'm live
actually, because there were times where, you know, and this is where we have, you know, there's always been good people that will do voice tracking work and will do voiceover work for radio stations. But man, I have heard those times where, and you can definitely, if you're listening hard enough, somebody says the name of a city or a street and they get it wrong. And I'm like, I'm sorry, Ken Dashaw in New York. You might be a great host up there in iHeartRadio, but when I hear you say, Copans Road, that tells me you're not from the area. It's like those things. When it comes to doing any of this right here, I mean, part of it is too is that from the syndicated format, were there things you had to go and do for these local stations, these affiliates, that was from a local flair? Anything you had to go and do in preparation for it to help? Because they needed something. I mean, it was more than just, the voice tracking. What else more did you have to go and do when you're in one of these formats?
Yeah, so there was a couple of different shows I would record at the same time. So we had more of an over-encompassing generic show where we don't mention cities, time zones, events, streets, nothing like that. It's just like you would get on a Sirius XM radio satellite. Yeah. It's just the information about the music or whatever we have going on promotionally for our company. But then certain stations would pay a little bit extra to get more customized content. And for that, for instance, I would have one radio break, say the first break in the hour, and I would have to record that maybe 10 or 15, 20 separate times in a row because I would have to change the call letters. So I couldn't say KACL and then the next one KXYX. I would have to do those back to back to back. Wow. So you really repetitively say the same thing over and over again. So in my mind, it's like, oh my goodness, can I please stop saying this? But the local radio stations don't know that they're not the only one getting that content. So that's what separates the guys and gals that are really good at that versus somebody that needs a little more preparation. It's when you can continue to do the same break over and over again and give it that same level of energy and an excitement, and also to really bring in that local vibe. Like, hey, I am in your studio. I am down the street from you. You can trust what I'm saying, it's so much different because I've also been in very small market radio, like Winter, South Dakota, a very tiny town in the southern part of South Dakota. And the same thing, it took a long time to learn the local sort of lingo and names of all the streets, but it's a very different dynamic, but it's equally as scary. It's just a little different.
What I want to get is some of the takeaways you got that you've incorporated now into Podtopia Network and also into even podcasts you do yourself. And then I want to get into the granular about the podcast network system because I get to go and do the same thing with WMR.FM and Cannabis Radio. So first of all, take me into what it is that you've taken now from be able to go and do this format where you have, whether it's music or you've done public affairs, radio as well, among other things, and just knowing for that mass audience what works best and what you took away from radio that made Podtopia Network your vision.
So I think the biggest thing that I took away from radio was the skill set, right? So it took a lot of time for me to get comfortable on a microphone. And again, getting into radio, we didn't have this camera on my face. So that took a whole nother dynamic of getting used to and speaking on a camera. But really it was learning the technical side of it, not only speaking on a microphone, because very large portion of my career was not on the microphone. It was behind the scenes. It was running the promotions tents. I was a promotions director. It was doing audio voice work and editing. So learning the skills that I needed to make and broadcast my own show, and then just keeping up with the technology as it got more and more advanced. We don't need a whole team to do a show anymore. So really what I found was the biggest part of my radio career that made my podcasting successful is I found my voice. I found what I enjoyed talking about. Now I've done radio shows on country music and adult contemporary and rhythmic classics. I've done AM formats, and those are all great. And they taught me a lot about myself and my presenter style, but I wasn't overly passionate about any one of those objects or topics, I should say. So what I did is I found my voice. What do I want to talk about? Now that I enjoy my own format and I control the pace of it, how do I create high quality content? And how do I make it consistent so people know that they can find me every single week? They're going to know that they can tune in on the same time, on the same day of the week. They're going to get new content from me. And that's what's been sort of the struggle for a lot of podcasters that I deal with and work with. It's being consistent because they don't see the growth they want right away. So they get discouraged and they throw in the towel too early, in my opinion. You got to really sort of prove that you're the leader in the space. You're consistent. People can trust you. And eventually you start to build these brand ambassadors and these loyal listeners and followers that are hyper engaged with your audience and your content. And when you do that, you start to snowball your growth really, really quickly.
So in the syndicated radio world, you were doing that back in 2014 with Westwood One. Did you get any attachment, or were you able to get any kind of inroads into Podcast One when it first started, or while it was operating right now? Did you get anything? Because Westwood One and Podcast One were still in the same boat together, I believe, with Norm Pattis bringing it up front. Did you get to go and be involved in anything with that at all?
So during that time, I had absolutely nothing to do with podcasting. It was 100% radio for me then. And I left Westwood One and went to a competitor, which is Local Radio Networks, LRN. And they are an ABC radio affiliate. At least they were back when I was working there. So I'm not sure if that's still the case. But they actually branched off and started a podcast radio network. I know Cumulus, which owns Westwood One, that's the parent company.
Right now, yes.
They have a podcast network as well. So as I got a little further out of radio, because I stopped doing radio shows myself, and I want to say 2020 or 2021 was when I stopped hosting my own like daily show or weekly show. Since then, it's really been an idea of mine to get a podcast going. And when I first started my current podcast called The Measuring Post,
right,
I didn't really know how to do it. I wasn't sure what I wanted to talk about. I just knew I had a name and an idea. And then I just sort of played around in my studio until I got something that was like an MVP, which is the minimum viable product, something that I could present and get feedback on and see what was good, what was bad, what needed to be improved, what I could keep as is. And then also just like, it's really overwhelming. It can be very overwhelming when you're first starting. We call it the analysis paralysis or chasing shiny object syndrome. It's you go online and say, I need to start a podcast. Where do I begin? And 9 million articles and videos and everything pops up. And you can spend weeks and months just researching. But I highly recommend, instead of doing all that, you probably have a camera on your cell phone or tablet. You maybe have a laptop. It's got a built-in webcam. You probably got a set of earbuds that came with your phone. Just turn on your camera and start talking. Play around. See if you even like doing it. Before you go invest a bunch of time and money into something that maybe you're not even interested in, start with what you have. If you're really enjoying making podcasts or radio broadcasts, then you can upgrade over time. But, save yourself the money and the headache and start with what you got. And just practice. That's the best takeaway you can have from this.
What's amazing now is that we have such an easy barrier to entry for podcasting now, because if you want to go through Spotify for creators, you can go ahead and start up the RSS feed, set everything up, and go ahead and get your show up and going. And then we know there's always the attrition where people will go ahead and start this and just not continue it, because if they just don't like it after a while, they just drop off. So you got to go into that process of finding out, okay, if this is something that fits for you, not to go into the work of trying to get all the extra equipment and all. I mean, I know for me in 2012, still had to go and pay for hosting. And my thing was I had to go and work my way through and go through a lot of work in terms of building the equipment little by little. But, the radio background was good for me because hosting the program and doing the content was going to be the easier part. And that was always something to just get into. But again, some 13 years later, almost 13 years coming up in December, now I'm at this point where for doing this here, but also having all that time doing podcasting and learning the ropes here. So the creation of the Podtopia Network, I want to get into that because in your own work, you learned various areas that were not even behind the mic, but more of the operations. So when it comes to graphic design, marketing, sales, promotions, some either consulting work, it gave you the idea to go ahead and say, okay, which is the format, just to be clear what Cannabis Radio and what WMR.FM does. At first, we did have free programming that we provided, that we had people that wanted to go and do a podcast with us come on board, and then we had advertisers that would support on that. But then we had the evolving change of the industry where we did things where at first we were just giving, some paid programming where somebody would go and pay time to go have an episode of a program we would put up. We would call it a town hall meeting. But now ever since we've evolutionized all the way up to the point where now we are doing what AM radio has done forever, which is brokered media. So we have people that are paying for their own podcasts, but then we've had to go and evolve the process of how much we have to go and do to supply to the client for content, whether it's the video, the audio, the transcriptions, the promotion, publicity, as you said as well, because you also do podcast publicity, you mentioned before, all those different things that a podcast could use. Plus, like you said, for people that want to get into this and don't feel comfortable trying to go through this all themselves, if they found an outlet that can go ahead and help them produce their podcast, take the heavy lifting off of them, that's what we've done. Like, I can't even tell you how much I have to go and do for every client on board, And at one point, we've had 26 clients. It was just, we've had, more than a dozen clients on any given network. And the work to go through with the team that we had to go and go through, not even the fact of like, we have to go and clean up the product, because post-production, we are also, with some of these shows, we're still teaching these people how to go and host programming on the fly. They don't necessarily have the idea of how to do a proper radio show, or just to host a podcast that's going to be with the listeners in mind. Take me through what you have for yourself in setting up Podtopia, if some of those same kind of issues are aligned with what you're dealing with right now, starting up Podtopia.
Yeah, 100%. And I think that there's two reasons people start podcasts, and we focus on both, but I'll explain what sort of launched Podtopia. So Podtopia Network, obviously is for all things podcasting. We even created an online evergreen course called the Podcast Accelerator. It's 25 video lessons that teaches people from start to finish how to start their own podcast. It's very in-depth.
Yeah.
And you actually watch me film myself start a brand new podcast from scratch. And that's a podcast that's currently in production right now as well. And the only reason I bring that up is not everybody wants to start a podcast because they want to be an influencer or a famous personality. There's a really big segment of the population that are business owners, that are thought leaders, that have things to share, but they don't really have the platform to share it. So maybe I don't want to be somebody that does a weekly interview podcast. I don't want to be famous or TikTok famous, whatever you call it. Maybe I just want to promote my business. Businesses should start a podcast, even if it's a 2 or 3 episode pop-up podcast that explains who you are, what you do, and why your customers and clients should trust you. Because then you don't have to hop on call after call after call explaining this. You can send them this video. Watch my pop-up podcast. Learn about us. Learn why you should work with my company. And here's why that is beneficial from a marketing standpoint. Because when you hop in your car and turn it on, whatever's on the radio is on the radio. You don't choose that. That's just what you're listening to unless you pay for Sirius or you're putting on your Spotify or whatever. So there's no real loyalty or an engagement in that scenario. However, podcasting is full of hyper engaged people that will consume your content. If they went out of their way to find your content, to download it and save it, and then listen to 30, 60 minutes of it, that means they're more than likely already interested in what you're doing and talking about. So if you're doing this from your business standpoint, this is the Joe Massa Business Podcast. Now you're tuning into me because you like my business. You're wanting to see if you can trust me as an individual to be the person that helps solve your problem. So create a podcast. And that's what Podtopia Network is all about. What we wanted to create is a place where not only individuals who aspire to be a personality can come to learn, they can collaborate with our community, but it's for businesses. And I sort of created this course, the accelerator, with like a guy like my dad in mind, who's a bit older now, but super smart guy, but not really technically savvy. So it would overwhelm him very quickly to do something like this. So we make it really easy for a business to come in, create a simple backdrop, simple equipment list. We go through how to ideate your ideas, how to research competition and target audiences, how to create marketing plans, and how to repurpose content, make intros and outros, logos, you name it, we talk about it. And it's meant to go from zero to hero and have a business podcast that then we bring also into the Podtopia Network. Your business then gets listed in our newsletter, and then you can collaborate with all the other businesses in there. It's sort of like in a free market for people to come in and share their business and podcast, and hopefully we can all kind of grow and learn and collaborate together.
How much are you directly involved? How much hands-on are you on with one of these podcasts that you're setting up and promoting? Because the biggest thing I have on clients is always about, I need to make sure that they're doing as little as possible, that they can completely have the trust in our work because of all the combined years of experience we have doing this. And I mean, for me, if I have to go ahead and, it's always been by, just experience. Okay, this person they want a prep sheet, to the point where they want a prep sheet to go ahead and prepare for the guests they're going to speak with. They don't have the time to do it. So all the way to basically, I can basically put every word of question in their mouth because they need that. We had one show in particular, they wanted celebrities only, people that were just very high profile guests from day one. And for me to set them up, he basically told me that just give me the questions. I will just read them word for word. And I did. And we had 25, 26 shows we did just like that. I didn't necessarily we did everything. It worked out fine, but just what we had to go through. Plus, there's always the ambitions that some of these podcast hosts or these clients that will go on board, they all have these ideas of, well, we want to have these people on, we want to have this, so there's an instant success, this immediate return on investment. How do you go and handle that part of meeting expectations and also trying to tamper expectations?
Yeah. So to answer your first question, as far as how much hands-on that we provide, really that depends on, let's be realistic. It comes at a cost. My time is not unlimited. It's not free. I've got paying clients that I do work a little more closely with. Some people, we do offer a lot of free resources, but the point of us providing a course, and the course is a paid course just for, full transparency, but it's to teach people the skills to be successful at it. The old adage, give a man a fish, feed him for a day, teach him how to fish, feed him for a lifetime. Yeah, I could do your work for you over and over again, but then you're not growing in the space, right? So we're going to show you the tools, tactics, and platforms that we use so you can consistently create your own great content, which is a very liberating thing for most people because then they're not waiting on me to respond or you to respond or whoever they're working with. So we want to teach people the skill set, and then the best way to get good at it, practice, practice, practice. Continually make your content better by iterating it and by learning what you're doing right and wrong, and do some A/B testing. Now, we're also in the process of opening up some weekly and monthly webinars where people can join for free, and we'll do sort of like a master class on one particular topic, whether that's how to be a good guest on a show or how to set up lighting for your cameras or a deep dive into audio editing using Adobe or whatever platform we're talking about that day. But to answer your second portion of the question, as far as managing expectations, that's something that it's always a bit tricky because, and I mean this with all due respect to anyone that's listening, people tend to think of themselves very highly, and you should always consider yourself great. But I've had people that have never been on a podcast. They're recording on their iPhone, and they have the grandeur delusion that they're going to be on Joe Rogan next week.
Yeah.
Not going to happen. You need years and years of practice and marketing and networking to get to a level like that. And a guy like Joe Rogan, I'm just throwing his name out there because he's on my mind at the moment.
Yeah.
You can't even pay to be on his show. It doesn't matter if you're $500 million in your bank. He doesn't need your money. So you have to bring something unique to that show or to a show of that magnitude. And that's going to be a unique story, a unique scenario, a product launch, something that really intrigues a guy like that. But again, what I try to tell people is, don't worry so much about the size of the show you get on as a guest. For instance, I'm a guest on your show right now. You could be a guest on my show.
Sure.
That's great. So people go, well, I only want to be on shows in the top 50 on Apple Podcasts. I go, okay, well, let's think about it like this. Would you rather be on a show that's top 50 that has 10,000 downloads per episode or more, but only one person actually engages with your business? Would you rather be on that podcast or a podcast much smaller, maybe has 2,000 downloads per episode, but 25% of their audience is engaged with your business? Do the math. The smaller show is going to benefit you more because it's niched down to what you're actually selling, talking about, and doing with your business, your product, your service. So don't worry so much about downloads, numbers, rankings. Those are superficial numbers. Worry about engagement. Are you getting return on your investment? Are you seeing your needle move in your business because you were on this podcast? That's what you should focus your energy on.
Part of it is too that it's not even a matter about being placed, because that's also the dynamic that I always have to go ahead and work with clients as well. And when I talk to the team about how we position ourselves, when you talk about the fact of how a person's voice is on a podcast when they're hosting it themselves, the biggest thing that I wanted to make sure of, in the last couple of years especially, is that if we have someone that, whatever ego they have, whatever kind of social media following they have, whatever kind of work they've done that preceded them, we want to make sure that they monetize, they actually will leverage the audience they've already built in for themselves from wherever they came from. That's most important. But then also that, this is my opinion specifically, but I think with every podcast, like you mentioned Joe Rogan, because he's one of the biggest names out there, I like to think that if I'm going to listen to his podcast, it's always based on the guest. And that's not necessarily because of Joe. Joe just asks good questions. That's fine. But not every guest is going to be my cup of tea. So I'd prefer to go ahead and create a podcast series where it's host oriented. So it doesn't matter who's the guest on the show. For this program itself, it's a matter of, it is part of where it's guest intensive. Like this program, it's based on which guests you like to bring on, that I want to bring on, that are podcasters, to learn about podcasting from their perspective. But at the same time, I want people to go and come because I'm the one doing the show, and then they'll come back to me because they'll say, okay, this person has knowledge, they have a good way of presentation, and then you come back because you want to hear the host. And that's the reason you come back, because I think some of the best programming there is just like as a DJ for a radio station, you go back because you want that tastemaker, that person you are comfortable with, you're familiar with, you have that one-on-one connection with. That's who you want to go and work with. But that's what I wanted to bring up on that point. Now, the other part is the dynamic between how you are, from what it sounds like with Podtopia Network, you're creating the do-it-yourself dynamic. And also with your podcast accelerator. We haven't talked about that yet, but that's also something you have right now in the horizon you're working on right now, where it is convincing and telling that potential podcast client that they can go to this themselves, they can go ahead and apply and take all the knowledge they need to create their own podcast. But again, the entry to come in and to give them the habit of saying, we want to keep doing this, that's a lot of work to go into versus if you are doing it for them and you're taking it all for them. Obviously, there's a premium to it, as you said. It should be. We put a pretty high premium on our own content, but I think in our experience, that has been the best way to going to do it. Sometimes we have somebody that will come on. They'll have their own kind of format. We just kind of pick it up. And in some cases, yeah, we're not going to charge so much for it. But talk to me about how you pitch a client to take on something like the Podcast Accelerator and get them to be convinced that they could do it themselves.
So, yeah, we do have a do it yourself sort of mantra, but we also will do with you and do for you. So just to clear that up, we're full service. It just depends on what you need.
But it sounds like the DIY model is something that you'd like to try to encourage.
Yeah, I think so, because a lot of people want to do this. You can't always rely on me. If I'm on vacation and you have an emergency, what are you going to do? It's good to learn these skills yourself as well. But again, we have some people, and I have some that are like older business people that they just don't care. They don't want to do it. They don't want to learn it. They're like, can I just give you X, Y amount of dollars and you do it for me? Mm-hmm. They just send me raw content. I'll polish it, edit it. I'll get all the promos put together, social media clips. Sure. You can pay me to do things. My time is for sale, during working hours. So it's not that that's not an option, but we encourage people to learn the skill set. And the Podcast Accelerator course is available online now. It's a do it on your own pace online course. Mm-hmm. There is handouts and resources that go with it that people can take, download, learn from. Right. Then they have access to our network and our communities where they can go in and ask questions. Here's the other thing. When you're part of our network and community, you go into our chat rooms, go into one of our private rooms and ask a question. Maybe I won't be the one that answers it. Maybe there's another podcaster in there that just did the same thing. We want to build a space where people can collaborate together, because I find that when I connect a lot of people, it always benefits me somehow, because then when I need a new graphic designer, I just go in the same group and I go, oh, this guy and gal looks great. I'm going to pick them up. And, it's a way to find resources that maybe you wouldn't find. So it's important to get your hands dirty a little bit and do some of the work, because here's the other thing that's really great about podcasting. The networking implications are massive. So when I'm on your podcast and then you come on mine later, we get to share audiences. We get to share newsletters. We get to share email lists. And number one thing I would recommend everybody, build an email marketing list. The bigger your email marketing list, the better. And a great way of doing that is getting them onto podcasts, tuning them into your social media, create a monthly newsletter, a weekly newsletter. Do the things that create people that want to be in your email list. Email list is much more loyal. It converts a lot higher than an Instagram follower or a TikTok follower. They don't really care. They just want to see your videos in their feed. So they'll click, yes, I like you. But they're probably not going to engage with you. If somebody gives you their email address, that's a little bit more intimate. And if they don't unsubscribe right away, you don't spam them out really quickly, you're going to find that those people are the ones that buy your courses. They tune into your webinars. They support your business, buy your products. So go on podcasts, get your voice out there, start your own, even if it's short-lived. Get a few guests on there. Cross network and collaborate, cross promote each other, That's how you expand your network exponentially. That's when you really start to see your needle move.
It's very interesting that you make the point that before you started Podtopia, you had your own podcast before, kind of just getting your toe in the water. Same thing happened back in 2003 when the owners of the company that I work with right now with the podcast networks had their own podcast in 2003 before even called it podcasting. And then eventually said, well, there was a show that he was doing himself. Then as a husband and wife, then they got together. The husband and wife decided to go and do a show together. Then that begat creating these podcast networks that we have today in the current iterations. So tell me about what it was when you got your own set into podcasting through the Measuring Post, which you have 34 episodes right now as we record to date, that took you all the way to the point of saying, okay, I need to be able to make this a model that I can go ahead and monetize with and make it self-sustain.
Yeah. So originally, after I got off of doing on-air radio, and I still work in radio, I still do a lot of voice work. I narrate books. I do all kinds of voice work, but I don't host a show anymore. But I knew I wanted to get back into that, but I didn't really have an idea what I wanted. So I did one season of audio only. The first season was audio, and there was like 12 or 13 episodes. And then I liked it, didn't like it, wasn't really sure. I took about 6 months off. Then I decided to do a video format. So I started doing video, and, the first couple were not great. The quality got better, even with my years of experience. And this is something to take note of too. If you're trying to start a podcast, your first couple might be really bad, and that's okay. You're learning. You got to practice. They're going to be bad until you dial in your process, your equipment, and all of the equipment things that go wrong, because things will happen. You need to learn how to troubleshoot and handle it on the fly. That comes with practice. So we decided to get into the video format. So I did a couple of those. Then I took a job as a podcast publicist for an international PR firm.
Yeah.
And the reason I did that is because I was like, this is a perfect way for me to launch my podcast back into the world, and also make some new connections and networking. Well, I won't mention the name of the agency, but
sure.
Needless to say, they were not a good agency. The owner was a bad dude. He was ripping clients off. He wasn't taking care of people, and it was a really bad look. And I was not willing to bring my contacts and my 20 years of friendships and relationships into this guy's agency for him to abuse and take advantage of them. Right. So I knew after the first 30 days that I was going to be leaving. So I sort of positioned myself. I said, you know what? He hired me to build this for him. This is my experience. This is my contacts. Why not do it for myself? That's the reason Podtopia was born. We just launched in January of this year. So our network is relatively new, but as an individual in the space, I am far from new, clearly, from this conversation. So it was more about getting out of working for other people and building something that I could control and really be proud of, but then also treat my clients with respect and integrity, do the right thing, and then show people that you can do. It's not that hard to do it yourself. It's daunting. It can be overwhelming and scary if you're brand new, but with a little guidance and a little patience and consistency, this could very well be something that you bring on as a passive stream of income, and eventually maybe even your full-time income if you really enjoy it. There's ways to monetize this through sponsorships and advertisers, and you can even get donations set up like you mentioned at the beginning of this episode. It's really common. If you enjoy the content I put out there, consider putting some dollars in my pocket, because that makes it so I can continue to make that content. But again, it's not, people think, well, it's a handout. It's not a handout. It's a tip. You tip your local waiter and waitress. You're tipping me for my content. So that's sort of the way I look at it. But we go over a lot of ways to monetize as well. And people think they're going to get rich off this overnight. Most likely not. So just, be patient with yourself, but be consistent with the process, and you'll get to where you want to go.
Also, I would make mention of, if you're going to be tipping service workers, consider Uber drivers. I'm a part-time Uber driver. Yeah, please tip your Uber drivers. Please do that. Just making that point. Now,
absolutely.
The other thing too is, in your area of PR, I am curious about that, because I get to interact with a lot of pretty prominent public relations companies. And, part of it is we met together through the website Quoted, which is, the basically kind of the replacement for helpreporter.com, Help a Reporter Out, which I like those kind of sites where I can go and connect with possible podcast guests or just guests in any media and medium in general. That was the part that felt good for me when I got to that site and finally I had to go and find an alternative. But in the PR realm, a lot of PR companies will go ahead and reach out to me from there. And I've gotten PR companies for years that have reached out to me. And from that perspective, too, to get those people to be guests on other programs, what have you learned from that experience? Because for me, I always had to go ahead and train from 2015, 2016, going forward to go ahead and supply guests for some of these programs. Because most of our programs are all guest intensive. It was always having to go and teach them, okay, if you're going to pitch me a guest that you want to bring on, part of it is, okay, I'll give you one of your guests on from a particular company to come on for a free interview. No problem. And they're going to get a great showing from me. But after that, we're going to have to charge you because we've got to do something and make some money back on this. We just can't take every time there's an appearance necessary. We got to do something more. Or can we get a podcast series from them? They can go and invest on that. Or even the PR companies. We've done that too. What I want to know is, there's obviously the idea that these guests that you can try to bring on board, there's paid earned media that's going to come back to you if you get them secured on a podcast. But also the pitch you have to go and do to get these other media outlets to be invested and to say yes and commit to making the time. Tell me about the part you've learned about that part, because that was the one thing I always had to go and do was, and these are bigger companies. You would think, okay, a lot of this is for cannabis, but they're in other mainstream outlets. And I'm like, all right, this is the cannabis space. Don't just tell me the background on somebody that you think would be a good guest. Make it relevant to stories or headlines or things or announcements they're doing right now that make me have a reason. Why are you here on the show? It's like a Tonight Show. What are you plugging? I want to have that part. How much of that did you already get from that takeaway from the people you work with in that publicity realm at that other agency and at Podtopia today?
Yeah, so we kind of work on all sides of this topic. We help people become guests on podcasts. So we call those podcast tours. So we do get people through podcast tours. We will help if you own a podcast and are looking for guests. We can help you secure guests. We also get a lot of guest requests to be on my show. I get people requesting me to be on their shows. So I kind of see it from all angles. Yeah. And some pitches are much better than others. Again, yeah, I don't need a 65 paragraph background and biography on your life. I'm not going to read it. Give me a one pager, very high level overview, your 5 or 6 talking points that you really want to hammer away. So I can look at it quickly and say, yes, no, yes, no. And that way it's nothing personal. I'm going to be able to tell if you're going to be a good fit for my audience and vice versa. If you're talking about something completely different that makes no sense for my audience, I'm not going to waste your time or mine because it's not going to be something that really moves either of us in the right direction. So The goal is to keep it short and sweet, to keep it concise, have a hook, have the meat of the conversation and a call to action. Here's how you get a hold of me. Make it as easy as possible to pitch yourself. But also, here's where going back to that previous conversation, managing expectations part.
Yep.
If you come to me and say, hey, I've never been on a podcast, but I want to be on all top 10 shows, the answer is no. I'm not even going to entertain it because you're not ready. You're not, and it doesn't matter. You're like, well, I got the money. I'll pay you. It's not a money thing. I can't make Mel Robbins or Joe Rogan put you on their show. I can't force anybody to do that. And I have very good connections in the industry, admittedly not that good. But even if I knew a guy like Joe Rogan, which I don't, he's not going to just take on Billy Biscuits because you gave me a 10 grand paycheck. And again, I'd imagine his name's not Billy Biscuits. It's just in my head. But, you know, it's you have to manage. You have to understand you've got to crawl before you walk. Go to the smaller shows, learn and hone your craft. Get good at being a guest on shows because that is an art. How do I dial in my story? Sometimes it's a 15-minute podcast. 15 minutes seems like a lot of time, but once you start talking, I mean, we're already 45 minutes into this conversation, and I feel like we're just scratching the surface. So how do I cut through the noise and get to the actual content? That is an art that people need to learn. And you can't learn that by watching me or Jorge do it. You got to go through the gauntlet yourself a couple of times. And by doing that, you're going to find ways to do it. But for a very long-winded answer, the best way to pitch people, whether it's yourself or if you're doing it on behalf of a third person, is really do a little bit of research to make sure that the show you're pitching is even a good fit to start with. If you cut through all the noise, and you know, sometimes you'll get a database with 1,000 shows. Maybe only 6 of those shows are good fits for you. So do the legwork up front and really target shows that would really be a good, honest fit for your brand or product. Once you do that, they're going to likely feel the same way. Like, oh, Joe's really a good fit for this podcast. So I'm going to entertain his pitch a little more than the person that's cookie cutter emailing and blasting it out to 500 shows at a time. You can tell the ones that are well crafted and personalized and the ones that came from an AI bot that sends out 1,000 per day.
Right.
So take the time to personalize each one and make sure you're sending it to the show that makes the most sense for you.
So in the lineup right now, to the website real quick. Let's go ahead and go to the website you already have right now, podtopianetwork.com and yourpodcastaccelerator.com. Podtopia, Podtopia network.com. You have 12 featured podcasts on the page, including yours, The Measuring Post, and the other ones that you've brought on board. What can you tell me about some of the programming you've already featured on there? Is there any kind of rhyme or reason as to who comes on the network and the kind of programming that they do to kind of complement each other? Tell me if there's anything about that comes into place and who is able to make the entry into being part of the network.
Yeah, so the website actually, as of today, which is June, we're in early June of 2025, is being completely revamped. Our podcast database is up well over 200 or 300 at this point.
Wow.
So those are just some featured ones. That website was a bit of a cookie cutter placeholder till we could get our course done and some of our other things built out. We're a small team, but, it's a lot to undertake to start a brand new business. Yeah. So, creating the course took several months, and you can find that at yourpodcastaccelerator.com. Building out the social media platforms and all the forms and the CRMs and all the stuff you don't think about for a business. That's what's really been the key. But right now, the new website we're hoping to have out in the next 2 to 3 weeks, it's going to be much more advanced.
Well, then by the time this show gets promoted and pushed out, you'll have the new website up. So for those that are listening in,
ideally, yes,
it'll be brand new.
Yeah, just know that. Yeah, just know that you'll notice a significant difference. If there's 12 podcasts on the homepage, that's the old one. So hopefully by the time we get this out, we'll have the fully site up and functional at that point. Okay. But to answer your question, we want every show. Any and every show is welcome to join our network 100% for free. And what we do is we push you out in front of our audience, and it helps us because we do get people that want to be guests on shows. And if you're one of the podcasts that join and is willing to accept guests, we'll send people your way. You can say yes or no. We don't control any of your content. We don't tell you what you can and can't create. We don't say that you have to pay us a monthly subscription. It benefits my company to have you and your show on our platform. Yeah. It also, if you go through my podcast accelerator and you create a podcast, we will automatically add you to our network free of charge. There we go. We'll put you in our newsletters. We'll put you in front of our social media audiences and share you around everywhere we can, because your success breeds our success. So we don't have you only can be a health and wellness or business or a personal development show. Any show, cannabis shows, health and wellness, conspiracy theory shows, political. We don't care. We have sports shows. We have shows on cooking. So we're not against any format. We want all shows that are willing to be on our network. And again, it's just for more discoverability. We don't control your content. We're not going to say, oh, you're with us, you can't go put your show on Cumulus Podcast Network. We don't care. You should be on every network that will accept you, because that's just more visibility for you. So there's no format requirements. There's no cost to join the network. Again, once our website is fully up and done, there's going to be an awesome onboarding form right there. We'll collect things like your URL to your website, your logos, your RSS feed, if you want to share that. And then we'll put your show on our platform and blast you everywhere we can.
There we go. Perfect. Joe, I really appreciate you taking time out. Now, website, by the way, for that is yourpodcastaccelerator.com. Yourpodcastaccelerator.com. Make sure to go and take a look at that. And podtopianetwork.com. Joe Massa here, CEO of Podtopia Network. Appreciate you taking time out to go and talk to us about all this area of the podcast network and what is necessary for those to go and really learn and understand marketing in even a do-it-yourself way, that it can be done and it's very efficient if you do it yourself, and just learn the wherewithal to go and be able to do that. So thank you for making time. I really do appreciate it.
Appreciate it, Jorge. Thanks for having me on, and looking forward to the next one.
All right. And listeners, we thank you for listening to the Podcasters Row. We'll talk to you next time.